Welcome to another episode of Living with FASD, an educational and human interest show for those living with fetal alcohol spectrum disorders, their loved ones, and anyone else interested in learning about FASD by someone with both professional and living experience with an FASD. This morning, I want to welcome Liz Kriston to the mic. I made her acquaintance on LinkedIn. We share posts all the time. She's fantastic, and she has such good information for you today. So I'll let you, Liz, I'm just going to let you tell everyone about your business and all the wonderful things that you do. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. So just briefly about myself, I'm a speech language pathologist by trade. I live in the United States, just in case you have listeners other places. I'm currently located in North Carolina, in Western North Carolina, in the foothills of the Blue Ridge Mountains. We just moved here in June. I am married to a wonderful man named Jim, and I have two daughters. My oldest daughter is 22 tomorrow, and she is studying to be a physician's assistant, so she's away. And then my youngest is 18, and she lives on the spectrum with an alcohol-related neurodevelopmental diagnosis, as well as those other diagnoses that sometimes our kids have, like an ADD and an autism spectrum. You know, she lives with anxiety and some medical things that we now are understanding are those comorbidities that come along with an FASD diagnosis. When I discovered she was about 13 or 14, I discovered what FASD was, and I'm embarrassed, but also kind of inspired by the fact that as a speech language pathologist, I was in the dark about FASD, and I didn't really understand what it was or how it impacted the world until I just happened upon a training, a professional development opportunity, and Dan Dubovsky, I'm not sure if I say his name right. It was a 1-hour training video from speechpathology.com. I just picked it randomly because I needed some hours for professional development, and I watched the video and I sobbed for probably 59 minutes.
That sounds like a God thing. You were meant to find that video.
Yeah. Yeah, because ever since my daughter was 9 months old, probably is when we started to encounter her differences, her difficulties with interacting with the world in various ways. And as a speech language pathologist, I pursued and I was persistent with various testing. Since she was 9 months old, she's been looked at, poked, prodded, evaluated, assessed, and not a single person ever suggested FASD. Well, I take that back. There was probably one woman who is a good friend of mine now because her daughter had an FASD, and I think she did mention it to me in a kind way, and I just didn't hear it. My mind wasn't open to that.
And that's probably why she was familiar with it, because she had a personal tie to FASD, and that's why I'm more than just coach. I do those professional development trainings because I can only reach so many individuals.
Right, exactly.
For so many individual families.
Right.
We've got to get more professionals up to speed with this.
Absolutely.
Because it's not a rare condition.
Absolutely not. Yeah. Yeah. So once I discovered that was a possibility for my daughter, I was able to dig a little deeper and get some more information about her birth mother, and I was able to contact a family member who has had another one of her children placed with her, and she said, "Oh yeah, absolutely. I saw her drink alcohol. I saw her smoke marijuana."
Wow.
And so I started to learn about FASD. I joined support groups on Facebook, and that first support group, and you're reading what parents are saying, and you're like, oh my God, their kid does that too.
Yeah.
It's not just my child. There's a reason behind this. I mean, the eating, the binge eat, like all the things that she did, everything
Yeah.
that she did. I'm like, wow. And
Yeah.
that was like so emotionally
Yeah.
impactful and so it was like just what I
Yeah.
needed. It was so what I
Yeah.
needed. And so
I can relate to that on such a deep level
yeah,
because, for my book, I interviewed many different people, most of whom were diagnosed as an adult. But when I sat down with Rebecca Talou, we had that same experience where it's like, you do that too? you know?
yeah,
And it's just like
yeah,
one thing after another, after another, after another. And it was crazy.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's just so, yeah, I just went down this rabbit hole of just every training I could get my hands on. I did the
Mhm.
FASD trainings. I did, I just like the FASD Collaborative has wonderful videos, trainings that are like all research based. They're certificate based. They're an hour to 2 hours long. They're free. I read books. I read articles. It's just hundreds of hours I've put into just
Yeah.
learning about it. I've joined the SIG group, the special interest group for speech pathologists with the FASD collaborative. So I'm with them. And I'm really just trying to become more and more an expert about FASD. And it's one of those things, I tell people all the time, like when you get trained on FASD and you professional development, you learn about it, like especially the way my brain works, I need it constantly. I need to
Yeah.
constantly hear the statistics. I need to constantly hear all of the information because there's so much. It's just
Hmm.
such a complex diagnosis.
Yeah.
And there's so much involved that I need almost on a weekly basis to read something or to rehear, like even just the basics of FASD, just
Hmm.
rehearing all of that data and all those facts
Yeah.
on a consistent basis. I just need that. That's the way my brain works. Maybe other people have more of a ability to hold all that information and access it quickly. That's not the way my brain works. So I'm
Yeah. Yeah.
constantly just rereading and educating
Yeah.
myself
Yeah.
almost weekly.
Well,
So
and things keep changing.
they do. They
I mean,
not as much as I
it,
would like, but they do.
yeah, but it's only been a thing for
Hmm.
50 years, right?
Right,
And look
right.
how far we've come.
Hmm.
When
Absolutely.
those early pioneers first published about it, do you think they imagined where neuroscience would take
Right,
us
right.
just in the last 20 years?
Yeah,
It,
yeah,
it's incredible leaps forward, but
yeah.
now it's getting all that knowledge out of
Hmm.
neuroscience and to push it
Right.
out to the rest of the world.
Yeah, and I don't even know how I did this, but somewhere along the line I signed up for WordPress, and it's an email that comes sometimes several times a week, and it's all of the FA and it's all FASD based information. And so I
Mhm.
get emails all the time with research articles and just little tidbits or little handouts or little and it's all funneled around FASD. So I don't remember how I did that, but I
Yeah.
love that I have that. So every time in my email I can click on something and I can read either a quick fact sheet or I can glance through a research article that just comes right to my email, and then I can
Mhm.
save the stuff and I keep it all filed, and so I have access to it. But that was one of the best things I ever did. And I have no idea how I did it or when I did it, but it just shows up in my email like a gift
Yeah.
every week. So yeah, so
Hang
then
hang
once I
on
be
one
yep.
second for me.
Mhm.
I need to tend to my dogs. I'm going to put this on pause. Sorry about that. Some of our neighbors in this little condo community take their dogs out before they go to school. So little Kiko's become one of my grand dogs, right?
Okay. I see.
And he wanted to play with my two.
Oh, I see. I see.
And they were going to wake my mother, which yeah,
Yeah, we don't need that.
no, I don't need that. Let her sleep.
Yes. Excellent.
Yeah. So it took some distractibility, kind of like working with, you know, some
Hmm.
of our kiddos,
Yeah, exactly.
oh, let's go out the other door,
Right.
trick them into the backyard, wait a minute, and then give them a treat when they come back in. And
There you
hopefully
go.
they forget all about Kiko's visit.
Okay, right. Nice.
They can play
Um,
after school.
yeah.
Oh my
So
goodness.
where were we? I don't,
Um,
so just kind of
we
talking
we
about my
were
background,
talking,
yeah.
yeah, and you were talking about that wonderful email that you get
Oh yeah, that
all the time
WordPress.
with that research that
Yeah, that's
I
awesome.
want to sign up for that
I
newsletter.
know. I'll try to figure out how I did it. And it's like WordPress is like it's like a place where they funnel all kinds of different information. And I think you can kind of refine
Yeah,
what you want to get. And
yeah,
so everything I get from them is FASD related and it comes from all over the world.
that
So
is
anytime
cool.
somebody publishes something, it kind
Okay,
of comes to me. So I'm not sure how.
all
Um,
right. I think
so
if I
yeah,
do that, I'll have no shortage of guests for the podcast.
probably probably not. So yeah, so then anyway, so through my training, I felt like I became competent enough and knowledgeable enough now to share the knowledge. And so I, with my mentor, who also happens to be my publisher, Shari Robertson, who for a stint was the president of the American Speech and Hearing Association. She
Mhm.
was one of my educators when I was going to college. And she's just a wonderful person. Anyway, she kind of rallied me and supported me and got me feeling confident enough about my abilities to educate others.
Mhm.
And so we together jointly did a presentation at the American Speech and Hearing Association a couple years ago. To probably 2 years ago. And then I also did a presentation at the Pennsylvania Speech and Hearing Association because I lived in Pennsylvania at the time
Okay.
on
What
FASD.
part?
I lived in Western, I guess I like
Yeah.
Western parts of the state, Western Pennsylvania, kind of northeast of Pittsburgh. So it's a town called Indiana, Pennsylvania was
Oh,
where
I
I,
know that town.
do you?
I'm from Pittsburgh.
Oh,
So
okay. Well, there you go. It's a small world. I don't know if I
and
knew that.
my stepmother was from Blairsville.
But oh yeah, Blairsville's 20 minutes from
Mhm.
where we lived. Yeah, uh-huh.
Yeah.
But I'm originally
Small
from
world.
Cleveland. I'm originally from
Okay.
Cleveland and I lived in Santa Cruz, California for a few years. And so I've kind
Okay.
of been here, there, and everywhere. But
Yeah.
I think this is my last destination here.
Yeah. I want to head back east too.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah, so I was able to do that. And then I reached out to the superintendent of the school district where I lived and asked if I could present to the teachers. And he was
Mhm.
really open to that. So I presented
Okay.
to the junior high school and then I presented to the senior high school. And then I just have done a lot of different smaller presentations,
Mhm.
via Zoom. I taught a college class one time. Um, and every person's reaction has been, why don't we know about this?
Uh-huh.
Why has
Yeah.
nobody ever told us this before?
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
teachers were phenomenal. Like it was a Friday afternoon. They were not happy about being there at 3:30 in the afternoon, having to listen to somebody talk about FAS, which they know nothing about, or they,
Until you open their
right.
eyes.
Well, to listen about FAS, which they don't need to know about because it's such a rare disability. And then when I started speaking, and I start my presentations off with a lot of like um, kind of really hard to swallow facts because I want to get their attention right away.
Mhm.
So I just hit them hard.
Yeah.
And within 5 minutes, they're like,
Yeah.
and then by the end,
Yeah.
they're
It's like, let
crying.
me tell you about this school to prison pipeline.
Right. Exactly. I mean, and I do, and
Yeah.
I hit them with these facts. I'm like, and I know it's probably controversial, some of the things I say, and I do have a lot of caveats about when I say something like
Mhm.
there is a research that shows that this might be, but
Yeah.
it's the data or the fact is what
Yeah.
gets their attention.
Yeah.
And then by the end, they came in disgruntled, and by the end, it was 5 o'clock or something like that. They stayed and talked to each other, and they were talking about students, and they were problem solving, and they were so, and I would see them out on the streets and they'd be like, thank you so much. This
Yeah.
was, that was just, I can't, and they would
Yeah.
email me and ask for the PowerPoint. And it was just like, these people want to know. They don't think they want
Yeah.
to know.
Yeah.
But then when you tell them, they're like, oh, we really need to know this.
Uh-huh.
And so I still, I'm continuing to pursue. I am speaking at ASHA, the American Speech and Hearing Association, again this fall.
Mhm.
I'm doing another talk on FASD, and I'm just doing everything I can. I reached out to the early intervention organization here in North Carolina. It's called the CDSA, and I think they're going to let me do a training for one region. Um,
Awesome.
the early intervention people in Pennsylvania have talked about
Mhm.
inviting me to come back there to speak. So I'm just trying to do that. And then on top
Yeah.
of that, when I became a member of the SIG group for the FASD collaborative, Dr.
Mhm.
Elizabeth Cleveland out of
I'm
Arkansas.
part of that. I don't get to
Yeah.
go very often, but I'm
Well,
part of it.
come join us. Dr. Elizabeth Cleveland reached out to me and another speech therapist and said, hey, because she has a clinic, she has a diagnostic clinic in Arkansas. She said, we need more people diagnosing, and you can do this. You can do this. You have the credentials, you have the skill level, you have the knowledge,
Okay.
you have the personal experience as well as the
Yeah.
professional experience, and I will mentor you.
Yeah.
And you can use the model that we use here at the SDRC, and you can do this. And so,
let's talk about that for a minute, because you know, most of us would have no clue that a speech and language professional could be an avenue to getting a diagnosis.
right.
Most of us are thinking neuropsychologist is like it. um, so clear
Tell you a
that
little
up
bit
for
about that.
me.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
First of all, I wanna make sure that everybody understands that speech language pathologists are medical professionals. We do work in schools, and we do get called speech teachers. Physical therapists also work in schools, and they're medical professionals. Nobody calls them physical teachers. Nobody calls them occupational teachers. They call them occupational therapists.
Yeah.
So I think sometimes people mistaken speech language pathologists as being educators. I find that to be quite a compliment. I wish I were as smart and savvy as many teachers.
Oh.
But we are medical professionals. We get Medicaid pays for our services. We work in hospitals. I'm a pathologist. I have a master's of science. I am a medical professional.
Yeah.
And a lot of people forget that about speech language pathologists.
Yeah.
So that's number one. The criteria for diagnosis is a medical professional. However, with the DSM-5, that is a clinical handbook, a clinical guidebook, and many of the speech language diagnoses come from the DSM-5. And the neurodevelopmental or neurobehavioral, I grapple with that because some people call it neurobehavioral and some call it neurodevelopmental. I prefer neurodevelopmental because I think the word behavioral implies things I don't like. But so the neurodevelopmental disorder with prenatal alcohol exposure is in the DSM-5.
Yeah. And I gravitate the other way on that. I tend to go with neurobehavioral because brain and body influence each other.
Right.
Right. But one of my caveats with that is behavior simply means the way an organism functions.
Right. And I think that that's great for people who have the educational background to dig into that and pull that apart. But I think on the surface, for a lay person, typically the word behavior, I think just
it's really hard to separate those adjectives. Good behavior, bad behavior, right behavior, wrong behavior, and it gets moralized.
Yes. And so that's why,
values.
Right. So if you're looking at it from a scientific clinical level, then yes, I agree 100% with you. But when you're looking at it from a layperson's perspective, I'm thinking as that person. So there are criteria, and I was just trying to dig up because I know that there was a committee of people that came up with the diagnostic criteria for the NDPAE, but it is published. It's easy to find if you Google it, and it's a very I'm going to unblur my background so you can see this better. So it's a very succinct and very specific criteria that has to be met. Now, the other thing is that the diagnostic criteria does support a multi-professional. I can't think of the word I'm thinking of right now, but
interdisciplinarian.
Yeah, something like that. So I know the word, it's just not coming to my brain right now because I'm getting to be that age. But so
welcome to neurodivergence.
a multidisciplinary evaluation. So essentially what that needs is myself alone, I'm not going to diagnose just based on the data that I gather as a speech language pathologist. So in order to kind of make those accommodations, so for example, Dr. Cleveland's clinic has a genetic clinic, like a nurse who's into genetics.
Mhm.
She has other professionals that she collaborates with at the clinic who all meet with the individual who's seeking a diagnosis, and they do their interviews and their various testing.
Yeah.
And then they come together and they make that decision.
Right.
And that's a beautiful thing. I don't have that. So what my plan is to take reports that the individual who wants a diagnosis, or the family who wants a diagnosis
Mhm.
for their child, will bring me the occupational therapist report, will
Yeah.
bring me the report from the psychologist, will bring me the report from the medical doctor.
Yeah.
And then I will do other testing as needed. So I can look
Mhm.
at the adaptive area with the functional adaptive
Yeah.
testing. I can look at the pragmatics or the social skills if it's not already being brought to me.
Right.
I can look at the speech and language skills. There's many things that I can
Mhm.
test for. And then I can use this criteria that's very clear and very concise. And I can say, okay, based on all the data and the interview and the information, I can clearly say that this individual meets the criteria
Mhm.
for an NDPAE diagnosis.
Yeah.
Or if there isn't the confirmation of prenatal alcohol exposure that meets the criteria, then I can potentially do an unspecified neurodevelopmental disorder with
Mhm.
suspicions of blah, blah, blah.
Mhm.
So
Mm.
I'm very confident that I have well, I know I have the skill set. I know I have the knowledge base. And I bring to the mix this personal kind of insight
Mhm.
that maybe other professionals don't have.
You'll
But
pick up on things that others will likely miss.
correct.
Yeah.
And so I think it's a beautiful marriage. And I have there is a physician here in North Carolina who works at Atrium Health in Charlotte.
Mhm.
And she also is a expert in FASD, and she does diagnostics in her clinic. And
Mhm.
she and I have consulted, and she was 1000% supportive. She was excited about this. She's like, this is
Mhm.
a way that
Yeah.
we can now really expand our
Yeah.
ability to diagnose individuals by using
Yeah.
professionals like speech pathologists or
Yeah.
other professionals. It doesn't have to be a speech pathologist. It can be other professionals. You just have to have the knowledge base. You
Mhm.
have to follow the
Mhm.
criteria and
Mhm.
then go forth and write your reports.
Right. Right.
And so it's a really wonderful thing if you start to open your minds to it doesn't have to be a doctor making
Mhm.
it, because I'm not doing a medical diagnosis. I'm not doing an
Yeah.
ARND or an FAS. And DPAA is a clinical diagnosis, and I'm a
Mhm.
clinician who is also a
Mhm.
medical professional. So
Yeah.
I'm excited to be able to fill this gap.
Yeah. And
And I think
that's
there's a big need for it.
one reason why I wanted to have you on, Liz, because Sip by Sip is written for recognition out there in the world because FASD is so rarely diagnosed. I've seen some references to 1% are diagnosed, and I've also seen it 0.1% are diagnosed, which is totally mind blowing. Um, and it makes sense why. We're 1 in 20. We're just nobody sees us.
Right.
um, so there's over in using 2022 estimated census, there's over 16.6 million adults walking around with no clue that their struggles in life, their challenges are related to prenatal brain injuries. And so the next question is, okay, this sounds like it fits. Now what? Right. And I'm in that camp as well. I just was fortunate to recognize all my symptoms along the lists of, primary characteristics, secondary symptoms, and go to my mom, who's thankfully still living. And she confirmed, yeah, daily alcohol use
Right.
throughout the entire pregnancy.
Right.
And I mean, totally normal in the 60s.
Right.
But, where would I be if I didn't have that confirmation
Right.
from her? There's There's a tremendous need for diagnostics. And even with the kids, I live in the Bakersfield area. Our kids, if someone here strongly suspects it, in order to get the assessments, our kids have to go to LA or Long Beach or San Diego. That's the closest.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you have to
the
wait for,
like 2 years.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because diagnosis is more about, it's more than just kind of being able then to create IEPs or medical plans. It's about making sure that FASD is being diagnosed so that it becomes on the radar, because if we keep misdiagnosing, then it just increases the autism numbers. It increases the ADD numbers, which don't need to be increased. Like, we already know those exist. We already have services specifically for those. We have monies for those. But how many of those individuals actually have an FASD? Whether it be the primary diagnosis or whether it be like a comorbidity.
Because you can have both.
Right, you can.
Or all three, lucky
or all
you.
three. But and like my daughter's autism diagnosis, I do not believe is a real diagnosis. I don't believe it's a correct diagnosis. And I really pushed back hard when people first started suggesting that when she was little. I know what autism looks like. And her social, especially the social piece, she has difficulties with social, but it's not because she wants to be separate from the world. It's because she desperately wants friends. She desperately wants to have those relationships and interactions. She just does not have the skill set to do it. And I think that is I have a gnat flying around my face. And I think that's the big difference between autism and FASD. And I'm not saying that there are kids who don't have autism that don't want to be friends, or don't want social relationships, but I don't think it's as much of a priority necessarily as than it is for a person with an FASD. And it's heartbreaking to watch her navigate life alone when she desperately wants friends. Anyway, so I just think giving more labels, even though I don't like labels necessarily, but I think in this case it's really important because we want to make sure we're doing the correct interventions.
And the other piece of that, Liz, is, a lot of doctors will say, well, let's just run with autism because you can get the services without the stigma, right?
Exactly.
Or let's just run with the ADHD because, we can help that. And that's the primary, bugaboo for this patient.
Right.
But autism and ADHD and all those other diagnostic, labels, for lack of a better term, don't carry with them the 428 comorbidities that FASD does.
Right.
And
and they don't respond to the same treatments.
Part of our right is the right to know the things we are vulnerable to.
Right.
That's part of, that's an important piece of our medical history.
Right.
And so, and this is kind of a side thing. I stumbled across an article from 2016. I'm going to have Dr. Jones come on and talk about it when his schedule lets up. My goodness, the man is way past retirement age and is so busy. It's amazing and awe-inspiring. But I'm going to have him come on and talk about this study that he wrote along with some others about you can get factual data about prenatal alcohol exposure without having mom's confirmation available. And it's through the baby teeth.
Interesting.
So if this has been known for 7 years, why is not every pediatric dentist in this country screening kids? It should be a standard protocol. When your child loses a baby teeth, you give it to the dentist.
Right.
Can you think of just imagine the difference that would make with all those kids getting early recognition, identification, intervention. Think of the difference that would make in school success or lack of success
Yeah.
in juvenile, in our juvenile hall or juvenile justice or
Mhm.
adult justice.
Mhm.
All of that could be prevented.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and so I currently have a full-time job. So the I2I FASD services is just I'm just slowly rolling it out,
Yeah.
and I work in early intervention, the birth to 3 population. And so when I do my assessments, I now ask the 3 questions. I first ask, how much alcohol did you consume per day prior to pregnancy?
Mhm.
And I give a scale from 0 to 3.
Mhm.
And then I ask at what week gestation did you confirm pregnancy?
Mhm.
And then I ask the 3rd question that doesn't really matter if they answer it because I can kind of figure it out. Did you consume alcohol after you knew that you were pregnant? And or how much alcohol did you consume? And I use the same rating
Yeah.
scale. And every mother, father, whoever, caregiver who has filled that out has filled it out honestly. And I have had in 30 some individuals who I've assessed in the last less than 6 months, I've had 5 birth mothers confirm that they consumed
Mhm.
alcohol. Now, that's not a diagnosis, but
Mhm.
when I look at all the other symptoms that
Right.
I see the child exhibiting,
Yeah.
it makes sense. Now, we're not diagnosing kids that young because it's kind of hard.
Yeah.
Um, I don't feel comfortable doing a diagnosis of a child probably before school age, just because a
Mhm.
lot of the issues, the differences start to become more
Mhm.
evident
More
when as
apparent.
they more
Yeah.
apparent when they come to school. So,
Yeah, because
um,
that gap
mhm,
between,
mhm,
what's expected and what the kid's
right,
capable of,
right,
that
right.
gap just grows.
And attention. Well, I always say toddlers are just little ADD anyway, like, because they're just toddlers. They're just, that's why I think any diagnosis of ADD before the age of, like, I don't know, 1st grade or 2nd grade is kind of difficult because they're just scattered. They're just
Yeah.
learning everything. But
Well,
it's the quality of it, right?
here's an interesting theory for you. In talking with another wonderful person, her episode has not aired yet. Um, her from observation, she's been in the FASD world for generations. Um, her observation is that, and she's very quick to say this needs to be researched. So here's a call to action to any research gurus out there. This is an area to look at. When you have those wee ones that get the ADHD label before really they should be getting that diagnosis, her contention is that it's related to, what did she call it? Cognitive. I got to look at my post-it notes to get that. That's not it. These little computer post-it notes.
I've never used them.
They're kind of cool, except maybe if I minimize my screen. Oh, there's my due today list. It's not getting done. Oh my goodness. Well, there we go. Cortical visual impairment.
Oh, okay.
Have you heard of that?
I've heard of different visual impairments that are actually related to the executive functioning as well.
Mm-hmm.
Visual, spatial. So I'm not sure how that differentiate or is different from some of the executive
Yeah.
functioning type things. But yeah, I mean, that's the other thing too, is that there's a lot of people who are looking at executive functioning deficits being actually the true diagnosis as opposed to like
Mm-hmm.
an ADD, ADHD or things like that. So yeah, that's
Mm-hmm.
interesting. It's
Yeah.
definitely
Said,
opening my mind and my eyes as
yeah.
that was
She
a
said
pun, I
a
guess.
functional vision assessment, right?
Yeah. Hmm.
Delayed visual maturation.
Yeah.
Will often get people an ADHD diagnosis
I can see that.
because, yeah,
Hmm.
but her contention is that it's FASD.
Probably.
Yeah.
That's my answer to everything. Probably.
Right.
Yeah, so it's really interesting as I move forward and continue my self-education and then educating others, and now potentially being able to offer people that the answer to that question, like, why is life so challenging for me, whether you're an adult or have a child who you want to know why, hopefully, myself and then other therapists, as they start to understand that they have the ability to do this, can start to answer that why, and at the very least, start to be able to help families and teachers reframe how they interact with this individual. And as a parent, I still beat myself up for those 13 years that I parented her the way that I thought I was supposed to parent her, the consequences and my reactions and my, just.
Yeah, because brain injuries do not respond to bribes or punishment.
They do not. And how many times did she sit in timeout and just laugh at me? And I would get so angry, just like, what a waste of energy and time. It would have been such, I mean, I'm not saying it would have been easy.
And it damages relationships for nothing.
Oh, my word. And the thing that I love the most about her symptoms is that she has that like Groundhog Day effect. So like when I'm a horrible person to her on Monday, on Tuesday, she has absolutely no memory, and she loves me as much as she did before. But after so many times of me just saying the wrong things or doing the wrong things, it starts to become, it starts to hurt her heart, and she might not be able to say why, but I know that's why, is because she's a good person and she doesn't understand why she was being corrected or being chastised or being, punished for things that she had no control over, and she didn't want to do them. So I feel like so for these individuals, these parents who are being so brave and admitting that they consumed alcohol, and I feel like I give them a very safe place to say that. I'm
kudos
really,
to them for being able to do that.
Yeah. And I really work hard to make sure that they understand that it's not their fault. They didn't know. There's doctors out there who are still telling birth mothers that it's okay to drink alcohol. I mean, it's still in the literature that they hand out. Oh, a glass of wine a week is fine. But what size,
right?
Yeah,
big glass.
Yeah, right. Yeah, the one that holds the whole bottle. And I enjoy wine. I'm not putting down anybody, and a lot of these women don't know they're pregnant for 6 weeks, 8 weeks, they're just living life. So I want to be able to help them at these early stages. While I'm not offering diagnosis at the age of 2, I am able to say, okay, let's just say your child is neurodiverse and that they potentially have this prenatal alcohol effects, maybe an FASD. Let's talk about how you can parent them differently, and how
as
you can,
if the diagnosis were in place.
Exactly. And starting to open their minds. They're like, well, I want my child to behave this way, and I'm like, well, I understand that, but maybe your child can't behave that way, and maybe what we need to do is set up the environment so they can be successful.
Right.
So instead of telling them to stop pulling the knickknacks off the shelf, let's just put the knickknacks away and just not even make that available to them. And just really starting to help them understand that it's okay to parent differently. And the hardest part is the judgment they get from other parents, from family members. You're spoiling them. You just need to tell them no, you need to do this. And I'm there for them.
You just need to whoop them.
Right. Well, there's that too. And so I'm there saying to them, it's okay for you to ignore those people. It's okay for you to smile and nod. It's okay for you to tell them to mind their own business. However you feel, that whatever your personality is. I would be the person to say mind your own business, but that's my personality. Whereas other people feel very hurt and pressured. So just giving them permission to parent differently and being a person that's going to be supportive of them when they're feeling like everybody else is judging them. So, at least I can offer that at these early stages. So that's really, and that's what I would love when I teach others, speech language pathologists or other teachers or parents or whoever I'm teaching, is to let them know, that it's okay to be doing it differently, and you need to just have confidence in the fact that you're doing it right. And so that is actually one of the impetuses behind me writing my children's book, which is about, it's invincible, not invisible. FASD is not the boss of me. And I wrote this based on the day in the life of a child who lives with the invisible disability of FASD and what it's like to be this person who struggles day in and day out with the symptoms of FASD, and how, they have to come to reconcile that this is the way that they are and it's okay. And that it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to ask for support. And letting other people know that these people who look typical but behave atypical aren't bad.
Yeah.
They're just different. Their brain just works differently, and we need to be okay with that.
Yeah. If you want to send me the link, the Amazon link to that,
okay.
I'll put it in the show notes, and that way anyone who listens or watches can order it if they're interested in doing that.
Yeah.
Because contrary to popular belief, people with FASD can be parents.
Yes.
So, my adult listeners with FASD might actually be doing a fantastic job of raising their own kids. I was talking about that with another guest who's gets a lot of pushback, and she's fighting against that in her own country. She's from the Netherlands. About, we have the right to have families, because their social services, is there's a risk of them coming in and taking kids. Just, kind of makes you think of that movie, I Am Sam, years back. There's just, we have so much work to do.
We do. We definitely do. But yeah, and so then I wrote the children's book, and then I was like, oh, that would be a great name for my business, but instead of it being invisible to invincible, I'm sorry, instead of invincible, not invisible, it's invisible. But and then I trip over it all the time. People are like, what's the name of your business? I'm like,
I
but yeah, I like the idea of making people who feel invisible feel invincible, and diagnosis, I think, can absolutely do that, because it gives them permission.
Empowering.
Yeah, it gives them permission to feel empowered, and then it gives them permission to be self-advocates and to let people know, I'm see the world differently than you. It doesn't make me better. It doesn't make me worse. It just makes the way I see the world different, and I just need your help a little bit. So that's kind of the purpose. And especially for adults who don't have a diagnosis, like, it could potentially just give them a peace of mind, maybe even, or and then also give them a way to go to their boss or whoever and say, hey, the reason why I'm always late is because I have executive function deficits that are related to my FASD, and therefore I'm doing the best I can. Maybe you and I can problem solve ways to help, maybe give me a flexible start time for the days that I'm struggling, or, just trying to build in accommodations into the struggles they have as an adult.
Yeah, absolutely. So you do diagnoses of, or you see people for that purpose in North Carolina, but in other states as well.
Right. So primarily, because I'm going to be doing kind of that multidisciplinary diagnostics with reports, with information that the client brings to me. And most of the testing that I can do over a Zoom call, I can do virtually. So I do have active licenses in the state of California, and the state of Pennsylvania, and the state of North Carolina. So I can offer services to those, to individuals in those states via Zoom. And I am, I'm following all the, the HIPAA and the FERPA and all the compliances and things like that. So, it's really doable. And so with my services, I would do a screening first, just to make sure that there's enough information for me to be able to move forward and to see if the individual meets certain just basic criteria, because I don't want to waste money or time. So once the screening has been completed, then, the individual then can start to send me all of the information, via, through email, or they can, if they want a hard, send me hard copies, whatever. And then I'll gather all that data. And then once I have all that data, then I'll be able to figure out what testing I need to kind of complete to fill in the gaps. And then we'll do the testing. And then after the testing, well, I'll do an interview. I'll send out a really comprehensive intake form. It's a fillable PDF where you can, hand fill it out and mail it to me, however. And then I'll do a live interview as well and do the testing. And then I'll compile all the data from all the different pieces, write a report with my diagnostic impressions. And then at that point, if the individual wants to bring a physician in and have the physician look at it and maybe sign off on it, they could, if they feel like it's going to give it more credence. But the diagnostics, the clinical diagnosis that I offer should stand alone, just based on, my credentials and experience. But again, if people feel more comfortable having a physician look at it and sign off on it, we can certainly collaborate on that level. The only other piece that really is going to be potentially a challenge is one of the criteria is that we have to rule out genetics as a possible answer. And so genetic testing, I know, can be really challenging. I do have a resource that's a genetic, let me see if I can find the name of the company really quick here.
It's also expensive.
Well, it can be, but the physician I was referring to earlier gave me the name of a company. It's called Bio Nano Laboratories, and that's what she refers patients to. And it is a online. Well, you can find the company online, and they do blood work through the mail. And I think that for a physician has to order it. The physician probably draws the blood. And I don't know everything about it. I just really started looking at it, but it's very affordable.
Okay.
I think she said it's like it's under $500.
Okay.
And so I was looking at their website today a little bit more closely, and it looks specifically for neurodevelopmental disability, genetically based neurodevelopmental disabilities. So that is an option.
Well, that's fascinating in itself.
Yeah. So that is something that a physician would have to order it, but I could, refer I could contact the physician and say, can you get this, can you approve this testing? And some insurance companies may pay for it, but I'm assuming most of it would be out of pocket. And so if we don't have a way to rule that out, we can certainly address that in the way that we write the report, and have sort of a conditional diagnosis, which conditional diagnoses do stand. They do have, they do have precedent, and I do think that they do qualify. But best practices would be able to rule out. Now, other people I've spoken to feel like everybody has something genetic going on, right? So like if you get genetic testing, something's going to come up. And then does that then negate the diagnosis because you have this genetic marker for something? It doesn't necessarily explain the symptoms.
Like I know one crossover is like Fragile X versus FASD. Well, why can't it be both?
Right. And actually on that website, they do not rule out Fragile X. They said that the way that they're testing is they can't rule that out. But so anyways, I feel like there's a little bit to navigate with that particular criteria, but I don't think it's insurmountable. And I do feel like, we can definitely, when we make the diagnosis, we can say, something to the effect of, barring any genetic explanations, this person meets every other criteria. And again, like you said, you can have both. Having a genetic disability or disorder doesn't rule out FASD.
Right.
So, but so I feel like there is a path forward to help people get off these long waiting lists, or just to maybe as an adult, you just want to know. And so I'm trying to keep my costs reasonable. It will be all out of pocket just because, the medical insurance is not going to reimburse me for this type of procedure yet.
But
perhaps.
and your services, I mean, you do more than just this. So,
Correct.
you do a lot of the more traditional speech therapy, right?
Correct. Correct.
So how have you seen that fit in with the FASD? Do you have, are a lot of the kiddos on your caseload, do they happen to have FASD, or do you suspect that they do? Um,
Yeah. I mean,
or I mean, language and communication is one of the primary characteristics. So
correct.
are
Correct.
there struggles that many of us have that you can specifically help with?
Right. Yeah. So as I'm working, so I'm back to the birth to 3 population, but
Mm.
prior for through COVID and a couple years after, I did work with the school age population, and that's part of the reason why I have my California license is
Mm.
because I was working with children in charter schools in the state of California via
Ah,
Zoom, and so
trying to pull my
I
chair up.
I encountered many students um, who I suspected had an FASD, but none of
Mhm.
them had a diagnosis. And so I was able to start to look at them through a different lens and kind of apply different approaches. And really, when it comes down to it, first of all, you're looking at executive functions, okay, and how they impact an ability, especially in the social pragmatic language. You need so many executive functions in order to hold a conversation. There's
Mhm.
so many, you have to pay attention, you have to have focus, you have to have working memory to remember what the
Yeah.
person says, you have to hold it there, not impulsively respond before it's your turn to talk, and then you have to remember what they said, and then you have to be able to comment on it in a meaningful way, but then wait
Yeah.
your turn and pause afterwards so that they can respond. I mean,
Yeah.
so many executive functions in conversation. So kind of coming at it from that lens and understanding that we have to teach them ways or to strengthen their executive
Mhm.
functions, or more importantly, giving them strategies and accommodations. So when I have kiddos who, especially the school age kiddos who have what I believe to be an FASD, I teach them different strategies and accommodations to, remember things, taking notes, highlighting, chunking,
Mhm.
saying things out loud to themselves, taking pictures in their brain, all these different strategies that we can use to help them to um, academically,
Yeah.
but also in those social situations.
Yeah.
Um, then I teach parents and teachers how to interact with these kids, giving them
Mhm.
time to respond.
Yeah.
No rapid fire questions, giving them lists, giving
Yeah.
them structure, giving them schedules. So it's not always just
Avoiding
about
the word why.
avoiding the word why. Yeah, so I really, my supports really focus more on strategies, accommodations, and teaching the people around the
Mhm.
individuals
Mhm.
how to, and then about self-acceptance,
Yeah.
self-awareness, and self advocacy.
Yeah.
Teaching these kids it's okay, and teaching the parents and the teachers it's okay for this child to say to you, could you please slow down, I don't understand. And
Yeah.
it's not disrespectful. It's them
Right.
saying, I need more time to process what you
Yeah.
just said. You're telling me too many things at
Yeah.
one time.
Yeah.
So really about this, I'm really big about self-advocacy from very little, like when they're very
Mhm.
little, and teaching parents about, okay, see this kid, he's dysregulated right now. Your child, and see how they grab their lovey and they're sucking their
Mhm.
thumb and they're rubbing their lovey
Mhm.
on their face, and you're still asking them to do something. Stop, give them that time to self-regulate,
Mhm.
and then move forward.
Yeah.
So teaching, and then giving them the language. Oh, I like how you calmed yourself. You were
Yeah.
feeling a little, and I say even use the word dysregulate with the 2-year-old to
Yeah.
figure out what it means.
Yeah.
You were feeling a little dysregulated and you calmed yourself. That was really
Mhm.
good. That's a good strategy. So really just
Yeah.
giving them that language. And all those things. So it's not traditional speech therapy in the sense where I'm going to sit down with flashcards and workbooks
Yeah.
and all that
Yeah.
stuff. It's really about giving them all the full skills that they need.
Yeah. And it sounds like a lot of that is recognizing the processing speed differences, right?
Absolutely.
Especially with auditory processing.
Absolutely. And visual,
Yeah.
like we were just talking
Yeah.
about, it's also
Yeah.
visual processing.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's
So,
it's been it's been a journey, and it's a lot of just being open to the fact that no two kids are alike. No
mhm,
two situations, no two teachers are alike, no two parents are alike,
yeah.
and you really just need to observe what's happening,
Yeah.
find what the strengths are. Okay, this kid really loves skateboarding. So let's do, and maybe next week he's really going to love something else. And
Mhm,
so all the things that you designed in your brain around skateboarding that you were going to use to help them, now they really love Pokemon. So now you're going to have to shift, and just
yeah.
really being prepared to be open to
We
shifting.
we have to be on our toes.
Yeah, yeah. And flexibility is part
Yeah.
of executive functioning, right? And so
Yeah.
our executive functioning might not be the best. And so being flexible and being able to shift in those moments may not be our strength. So we
Yeah.
just really have to try and be aware of where our strengths are with our executive
Mhm.
skills
Absolutely.
so that we can be supportive of theirs. So, and
Right.
also knowing that executive functioning skills are not indefinite, like you need to replenish. And so at
Mhm.
the end of a long work day, as a speech therapist, I'm not going to have the cognitive flexibility
Right.
to pivot like I did at 8 in the morning where
Yeah.
I'm my freshest,
Right.
so just being aware of all those things is really
Yeah.
important.
Yeah. Well, we have talked about so much this
We
morning.
have.
Oh my goodness.
We're all over the place.
We've covered a lot of ground. So, yeah, I'm very happy to put all of your contact information and the link to your book in the show notes for anyone that would like to talk with Liz about possibly getting her services. Especially if you are new to the idea that FASD might be affecting you on a personal level and, don't have the diagnosis because it's just a brand new idea, then sounds like Liz is the person who can help you figure that out. And if your kiddos seem to be neurodivergent, absolutely get that book, especially if they have FASD. Liz, I'm sure you know the stats for foster care and FASD. So if you are parenting kids who have been in the system, or maybe from an overseas orphanage, just know that there's a very high likelihood that FASD is in your world, even if it's not diagnosed yet. So, I often say that figuring it out changes nothing and everything at the same time. It
True.
doesn't change our circumstances at all. It doesn't make it magically easy for us to do the things that we've struggled with. But having that perspective, that lens through which we can look at all the events of our life, all the stupid things that we did when we were, teenagers or transitional age young adults, you know, all of a sudden we have a better explanation for those things, and for our quirks and for any of the other FASD related struggles. So, and that perspective is priceless. So, and to have both that perspective and the diagnosis that does give you that backbone to say, you know, I have a right to these accommodations, that will take you far.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
Liz, thank you for
Thank
joining
you.
me. I'm so glad that you were able to come on this morning. Of course, it's a lot later in the morning for you than it is for me.
It is. It is. I already, yeah, I went for a walk. I did did
And
all that
I'm
stuff.
I'm going to go make my first cup of coffee in a few minutes. But I can't believe that another episode is wrapping up already. So, for those of you listening and watching to Living with FASD, if you want to join the community, then head over to Facebook and do the groups tab and look for Living with FASD podcast. Come on in and make some new friends. Toss out ideas for other podcast episodes that you might, something you might want to learn more about or that you have found really interesting. If you want to share any bits of your journey, whatever you want or need, we're going to be there for you as a community. And then also, I am a certified facilitator of the neurobehavioral model from FASD. So for anyone listening, if you would like to talk with me about arranging professional development training for your agency or your community organization, then go to the show notes and the link for my e-scheduler will be there. Liz also does trainings apparently, so you can contact her for that as well. And, we have different training background, different perspectives, but we're all on the same team. But come back next week for another episode or another candid conversation of living with FASD. And if you're watching this on YouTube, check out my other content with the free Friday tidbits on the neurobehavioral model. So, Liz, thank you again.
Thank you.
And everybody have a great weekend, have a great week, and see you next time.